We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Vav Amid Beis in Meseches Nazir. This is Nazir Daf 36b. On the previous Zamar, Abaye asked a question to Rav Dimi based on a Mishnah in Tvul Yom. The Mishnah says, let's say you have a thick soup that's chulin and it has garlic and oil that's truma, and a Tvul Yom touches it, so he disqualifies the area that he touches. And the Gemara said, what's the reason for that? And the Gemara quoted Rabbi Yochanan. The Rabbi Yochanan says it's because if a non-Kohen were to eat this mikveh, this thick soup, so he would get malchus if he eats a kazayas. And so now Abaye continues his question, why is it that the individual, the non-Kohen gets malchus? Lav mishum de heter mitzdaref le'isr. Isn't it because we have a concept of heter mitzdaref le'isr, even meaning to say, even though there's not actually a kazayas of truma that the non-Kohen ate, but the heter, the part that is not truma, actually combines with the part that is truma, and therefore he has eaten the proper shear. And that's why he's going to get malchus, and therefore you see that heter is mitzdaref le'isr even in cases other than situations of nazir. And so the Gemara continues, Amar le, so Rav Dimi said back to Abaye, lo, no, that's not the explanation over here in terms of Rabbi Yochanan's halacha and in terms of this Mishnah in Tvul Yom. My kezayis, diika kezayis b'chdei achilas pras. What does it mean they have a kezayis over here? What it means is that the person actually consumes a kezayis of truma b'chdei achilas pras, and the amount of time it takes to eat a pras. A pras is a half a loaf of bread. In other words, the point is you don't have to eat the kezayis all in one shot. As long as you eat the kezayis over this short span of time, that also will create a chiyuv midoraisa, and that's all that we were saying in reference to that Mishnah in Tvul Yom. And so the Gemara continues, V'achilas pras doraisa, is this halacha of kezayis b'chdei achilas pras, is that actually a concept on a doraisa level, which is what is being suggested? Amar le said to him, yes, indeed, that is a halacha on a doraisa level. But the Gemara continues, Ihachi, if so, if there's a concept of kedei achilas pras on a doraisa level, amai pligi Rabbanan led Rebbe Lazar bekusach habavli. Why did the Rabbanan argue in Rebbe Lazar by the Babylonian kusach? Again, Rebbe Lazar says when it comes to chametz on Pesach, even if you just have chametz mixed into something, like by kusach habavli, still there's going to be a prohibition. And the Rabbanan disagree. But why do the Rabbanan disagree? If you have chametz that's mixed in by the kusach habavli, don't you have a kezayis of chametz that's being eaten b'chdei achilas pras? So Amar Lei said back to him, Hanoch lekusach habavli, leave aside the case of kusach habavli, the leka kezayis b'chdei achilas pras, because by the kusach habavli there are some breadcrumbs in this kusach habavli, in this dip, but it's not enough to have a kezayis b'chdei achilas pras. And the Gemara explains, if the individual eats the kusach habavli, he doesn't eat it like a dip, he just eats it straight, so so his intention is batal, it's nullified relative to everyone else. That's not the normal way to eat it anyhow. And he mishta kashater, and if he's going to eat it and treat it like a dip, so then lo mashkachas kezayis b'chdei achilas pras. Then it's not going to turn out to be a kezayis b'chdei achilas pras, and that's why there's not going to be a prohibition in that situation. It won't accumulate to a kezayis. And the Gemara continues, Eisve, we have another question from a Braisa, Shtei meduchos, achas shel truma v'achas shel chulin. Let's say there are two mortars, one has spices of truma, one has chulin. Ulefanav shtei kederos, in front of it is two pots, achas shel truma v'achas shel chulin. One has truma, one has chulin. V'naflu elu l'sochelu, and then some fall in the other, meaning the spices fall in. We don't know what fell where. So shtei and mutaros, they're both going to be mutter. Sha'ani omer, because I can assume, I can say, chulin l'so, chulin naflu. We can be lenient and assume that the chulin fell into the chulin, meaning the non-truma fell into the non-truma. U'truma l'soch, truma naflu, and the truma fell into the truma. We assume that everything is okay. And so Abaye now asks Rav Dimi, V'salka daitoch kezayis b'chdei achilas pras doraisa. If you think that kezayis b'chdei achilas pras is doraisa, meaning if you think over here we're dealing with a potential isser doraisa, amai amrin on shani omer, why do we say there's leniency that we just assume the truma fell in the truma and the chulin fell in the chulin? We should be strict. But the Gemara then says, Elamai, but if you're not going to say that Kezayis b'chdei achilas pras is doraisa, what's the alternative? So heter mitzdaref li'isr, the only alternative we presented is the idea that heter is mitzdaref li'isr, that the heter joins together with the isr to create the prohibition. But then you have the same question. Amai amrin on shani omer. Why do I say shani omer over here? Why am I lenient? Again, even if you'd have a situation where the truma falls into the chulin, they're going to be mitzdarif in this case, heter mitzdarif li'isr, and that also will create a prohibition. Elahanach l'trumas tavlin d'Rabbanan. Rather, you have to say to leave aside the situation of truma of spices, because that's only midrabbanan. When it comes to truma, the only kind of truma that's doraisa is by grain or wine or oil, and therefore by Trumas Tavlin, we're able to be lenient. And the Gemara continues, Eisvei, we have another question from a Braisa, Shtei Kupos, if you have two boxes, Achas shel Truma v'achas shel Chulin, one has Truma, one has Chulin, V'lifnein Shtei Soy and Achas shel Chulin v'achas shel Truma, in front of them you have two Soy, one of them is Chulin, one of them is Truma, V'naflu Eilu l'soch Eilu, and these fall into those, Shnei and Mutar, and again we say they're both Mutar, Shani Omer, because I can say, Chulin l'soch Chulin naflu, that the Chulin fell into the Chulin, Truma l'soch Truma naflu, and the Truma fell into the Truma. And again the Gemara asks, Visal Gadaitach, if you think Kezayis bechdei achilas pras aser, then when it comes to Kezayis bechdei achilas pras, that is aser on a doraisa level. So again, you're dealing with a doraisa. Amayam rinan shani omer. Why should I say this leniency over here and assume that the chulin fell into the chulin and the truma into the truma? And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Zayin Amid Aleph.